Fishing Masterclass questions. You join me here today with the main man himself, Nick Speed from Shimano and Dynamite Baits. You right, Nick?
Hi, mate. How's it going?
Yeah, good time, mate.
You're good?
Yeah. How you doing in this present moment in time?
There's things to do to entertain yourself, isn't there? So yeah, I'm keeping busy, mate. Bit of decorating, and to be honest, I've not been doing much fishing stuff because I don't know when we're going to get out. But yeah, I've just been getting some stuff done that I needed to get done. So all good. To be honest with you,
that's the main thing. I think the problem is with doing fishing prep is you don't know what you're prepping for, do you?
Exactly. So yeah, I've been doing a bit, but yeah, let's just watch this space, see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Just keep busy and keep occupied until then, and that's it.
Yeah, I think there's plenty for us to be getting on with anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
Whether that be housework or whatever. But I've got a couple of questions to ask you, Nick, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And depending on how much in depth you want to go into the questions, which you're the person I've come to for these questions because I think it'll suit you, and I think the viewers will get the most out of the questions from yourself. But yeah, so the first one is from Aaron Morton, and the question is: can you explain what to look for with air pressures, as I would like to plan my match before I start fishing?
Right. Well, air pressure is, and this is something I did in a talk very briefly, extremely briefly, with Catchmore Media the other night, the live feed I did. And basically, what happens is the difference between high air pressure. Basically, it's 113 millibars and above is classed above air pressure above normal air pressure. So it's like, what is air pressure? What is high air pressure? Well, you're not going to walk around with a barometer all the time, and air pressure changes extremely quickly. So it's a case of understanding that basically on your hot, warm days, and generally when it's low wind, bright sunny days, and it's a feeling where you could get up in the morning, you could go fishing, you could have your hoodie on, you could be getting ready. Halfway through match, you've still got your hoodie on, it's windy, all of a sudden the wind drops, and you think, it's getting a bit hot. You take your top off. That's when it's high air pressure, and you can physically feel it in the air. And what happens is with high air pressure and low air pressure, it really does affect the water. And underneath the water, in let's say depths of 4 foot and above, especially during the spring, the summer, and the autumn months, you've got two water columns. You've got the upper level, which is called the hypermillennium. Then you've got the lower level called the lower millennium, and in between you might have heard before, the thermocline. And the thermocline is a separation between warm and cold water. Now, what affects where that thermocline sits is the air pressure. So when it's high air pressure, the thermocline is compressed higher up in the water column, which compresses the warm water in a smaller area, which means that the fish are compressed higher up in the water, that they still want to be in that warm water, because on commercials they associate the surface of the water with the contact of food hitting the surface. This is obviously in the systems from being in a stock pond and having to compete for food in order to survive because of the massive fish in lakes in stock ponds. So it's born into them that they have to compete near the surface. And also it means by being in the warm water, they can digest the food and carry on feeding and moving. When it's higher pressure, that's when your deck fishing becomes a little bit funny, especially on your deeper venues, because they're so reluctant to follow your bait down. However, there are certain methods that do still work when it's higher pressure on the deck, and that's why paste is so good, because it's an individual bait that in a way entices the fish to look down when they miss it, because it falls quicker, and so for that reason they follow it down. And that's why a method feeder works in high air pressure, and big baits work with high air pressure. But when you're trying to catch on the deck when it's higher pressure with smaller baits, let's say 4 mil pellet, 6 mil pellet, the larger percentage of that bait that you're trying to introduce into the water isn't even getting to the bottom because the fish are intersecting it higher up in the column where they want to be.
Yeah.
but it's not enough enticement for them to follow it down, and that's why you foul up the fish, because they kind of like get half interested in it, they go down a bit, and then they come back up, and that's why you get liners and you foul up fish. And that's why when they do go down to the bottom, you hook a fish, and next thing you're playing it, and it's bow waving underneath the surface, because that's where it's come from. So basically, don't go on barometer readings, go on feeling. So during the summer months, when it's not as windy, it's calmer, and you can feel that it's high air pressure, that's telling you that you need to choose the right methods, such as margin fishing, shallow fishing, method feeder against an island, pellet waggler, even your short line on your bottom of your near side shelf, where you're venturing to the deeper part of the lake before it bottoms out onto the silty bottom, even that is affected by high air pressure. So it's about fishing in the correct depth of water, and generally that is, when it's high air pressure, you're looking at 3 foot and above. And as the season moves further forward, and God knows by the time we get out, it will be having an adverse effect. It could be in the months when all of a sudden the water temperature starts dropping. But generally, as the water temperature rises, the shallower the water you need to be in if you want to target the correct fish that are going to win you the matches. So basically, that is what high air pressure is. Low air pressure is where all of a sudden it could be high air pressure, and exactly the same happens, completely the opposite. It becomes cloudy, the wind picks up, it gets a bit of a chill in the air, and that's when the thermocline relaxes and it goes further near the bottom, and there are days where everything works. So now you can imagine that warm water has actually relaxed and covered a larger mass of water, which has dispersed the fish more. So it's harder to find, and it's harder to find the depth of what the fish want to feed at. And as I said, that's why a multitude of approaches works, not just one particular approach.
Yeah, brilliant.
So that's the basics of it.
Yeah, I think the penny's just dropped with me, to be honest. So, you know, if you sat at a lake and you said, right, you can only have one cast throughout, so there's 12 hours of light in the day, and if someone said to you, you can only have one cast in that 12 hours, and you need to get a bite within 5 minutes, I think 99.9% of people would cast just before last light, wouldn't they? And is that because the air pressure it becomes low?
No, I wouldn't. It's not about time of day. It's about finding the right depth. So let's say, for example, it depends. It's like $1 million question.
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, if you're facing, you've got a far bank on the other side, and there's loads of cover, and it's the middle of summertime, then I'd be wanting to chuck a feeder where it's 2 or 3 foot deep to get a bite, because that's where the fish are going to be, in the shallow water where there's cover.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about the time of day, it's about fishing in the right depth of water at any particular time of day.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing with watercraft, is understanding how the fish want to feed rather than how you want to feed them.
Yeah. So, you know, on evening matches, Nick, when fishes just seem to be solid, when the weights are just so much better on evening matches, why do you think that is?
More space, usually.
More space.
If you think about it, a lot of your evening matches, you've got less anglers turning up. Like what you said, it's time of the day where the fish associate that with looking down the margins for food, because they're so used to anglers throwing bait in at certain times of the day. They're very clever. I mean, how many times do you have it where, you might not have even had a fish down the margins, and you pack up, put your fish back, you chuck your bait away, you go back, just check you've left anything at your peg, and there's some tails underneath your platform. Yeah. They're very clever. If fish were easy to catch, we'd be doing another sport now, because we'd have done it all.
Yeah.
So they always keep you thinking for that reason. So that's my reason why in the summertime, if you're going into summertime for a big match, you're either looking at edge, short, and occasionally shallow. But even that goes funny in the evening, because there's not as many fish competing for bait out there. They find it easier to come down the banking and mop up the food that's left for them.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why the bigger fish are so used to living out just underneath the surface, bow waving about, that you don't catch all day. And then when it comes to the right time of the day, they swim at the same depth from out Alright. From out in the open water, at the same depth, down the banking looking for food. That's when you hook them, you don't swim down the ledge and carry on fighting. You hook them, they're bow waving out just underneath the surface because that's the depth that they've come into your peg from.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for answering that first question. That was for Aaron Morton. The next question. When would you use a method feeder over a hybrid feeder? Which I understand this has been asked loads and loads of times, but
well, to be honest with you, it's depth, and it's something I've figured out over many years of spending a long time on the method feeder because I'd say it's my main approach. It's one of my strongest approaches. It's all about depth. So basically, a flatbed method feeder is extremely effective in shallow water during the heat of the summertime, when generally I want to use a large percentage of ground bait. Now, the disadvantage to a flatbed method feeder is water can get into your bait very, very quickly. So if you're, let's say, using a flatbed method feeder with just pellets, by the time you've pressed that mould and by the time you've cast it out, even in that time alone, your pellets are expanding on the feeder. No matter how you prep them up, I do them quite hard for that reason, to make them compact.
Yeah.
Then they've got to hit the surface, then they've got to get down, then you've got to put your rod down, and in that time your bait is released very quickly from the feeder, and in turn often you're giving the fish too much choice, and that's why you get loads of indications and it takes you a while to get a bite. Whereas a ground bait makes the mix more compact. It forces the bait to stay on the feeder, and in turn you get a bite quicker because your hook bait is released quicker. But yet they're aggravated because they can't get to the bait because it's not coming off the feeder.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage of using ground bait in the summertime. When it comes to deeper waters, that's where you need a style of feeder that is going to protect the walls, protect your bait by having walls, and that's where a hybrid feeder comes into it. So the easiest way of looking at it is, for all my short chucking commercial work in the summertime, I use a flatbed method feeder. And then when it comes to anything else, where you're going at longer range, and sometimes even long range up to an island in shallow water, I prefer to use a hybrid as opposed to a method, because it's just making my feeding table really, really small. And then depth then is dictated by the baits that you're going to be using. So when you go to venues, open water venues, where you're chucking a method, you really just do one particle baits for carp. And that's why a hybrid feeder blends so well with just 2 mil pellets or 3 mil pellets, whatever you're going to put in.
Yeah.
And that is the difference. So short chucking on commercials or flatbed, and virtually everything else above 3 foot in depth, I use a hybrid feeder.
Hybrid. Yeah, I done one of these with Grant Orbit earlier on today, and he showed me one of his favourite mixes, which is green swim stim and marine halibut. And I said to him, I've seen that Nick Speed. That's one of his favourite mixes as well. And is that pretty much all you use on the method feeder, ground bait wise?
Yeah, well, as I said in that talk I did the other day, it was the mix that I kind of like come up with just by experimenting. And in the early days, people just used to mix ground bait up, and I'm sure there was a very small percentage out there that did experiment. But I come across this mix, and it was that good that it's my main mix that I rely upon. What I do sometimes is I use the swim stim feeder formula, which comes in a ping bag. Yeah. Have I got any here? No, I haven't. Not in this room. And that is very, very rich in fish meal. Very rich in fish meal. And I like to add that in the summertime to add that extra boost. Yeah. But generally, those two mixers mixed in different percentages depending on the depth of water that I fish in. Generally, the deeper the water, and I'm on about, let's say, the difference between a 12-inch peg and an 18-inch peg. Yeah. That I'll use a stiffer mix to compensate for that extra depth of water when I'm chucking it tight. Or if I've got extra vegetation on the other bank that I need to get my method through to get really tight against the bank, that's where I use a lot more marine halibut to ensure that everything's more compact and it's not going to come out as it's going through the shrubbery or hitting the water.
Very sticky, isn't it, marine halibut? Really sticky.
It is. You have to mix it very carefully. Yeah. But that's why I my mix for a method feeder is quite a dry mix anyway. I always use a dry mix for that reason.
Yeah.
To allow the groundbait to work properly, and it allows me to customise how I want that bait to release from the feeder.
Yeah.
By the amount of compression I give it in a feeder. It is. A lot of people think method feeder is about mix your groundbait up, put them up, put it in. It's exactly the same as any style of fishing. That there's a lot more to it than just mixing some groundbait up.
Yeah. Then that wasn't even one of the questions, but another. This little question from me. I seen that you used to use maggots all the time, and then all of a sudden you seem to swap to like hard baits, like washters and stuff like that. Is there a reason for that?
Ricky, it's all about a confidence thing. Hook baits is about confidence, and however, there's certain things that I did when we were developing the washters, when we were testing, that the additives that we were using, and it's something I've never ever been into, made such an apparent difference. It wasn't just once; it just happened every single time.
Yeah.
So at certain times of the year, when I'm using ground bait around a flatbed, that's where I've got a mixture of hook baits from a washter to a maggot, because soft baits then blend well and marry well with ground bait, because obviously the ground bait is moulding around the hook bait as you compress it. With pellets, it doesn't have the same effect, and pellets can't bind around maggots as well, and that's why often the lid of the cap of your flatbed method might come off on the cast or on the surface, because they can't. The pellets can't bind around the maggots. 1, 2, 3 bunches of maggots. You have to add ground bait with your pellets. So generally, when I'm targeting like loads of bites, especially on my local scene at Lindome in the summertime, catching a lot of fish on a method, I'll stick to a single maggot.
Yeah.
And that blends with the ground bait. But then any other time of the year when it's more associated with a hybrid and pellets, then I'll use nearly all the time a 5mm or a 7mm washter. And that's because I'm confident on them. And I like to minimise my choice on the side tray. I don't want to be halfway to the match thinking, well, my bites have gone, so I'll put a pink on now, I'll put an orange, or I'll put a pellet on. It's because they've moved into a different depth of water. It's the more logical facts that I need to look at than have I got the right hook bait on.
Yeah.
You know, the principle, what happens with a method feeder is that, your hook bait does stand out, but they're coming up to the bait around your feeder, and if you're not getting indications, then you could be fishing in the wrong depth of water, not that you've got the wrong hook bait on.
Yeah. Brilliant. That's answered that question, lovely. Just one more question, Nick, on that subject, and this is just me now trying to just get a bit of information off you as an individual, because a lot of my fishing is based around the method feeder as well. So if it's carp I'm fishing for, near enough 100% of the time I'll go for pellets. Would you go for ground bait in any carp situation?
Again, I've already answered the question regarding it all depends on the depth of water I'm fishing in.
Yeah.
So if I'm chucking it tight against an island and I'm targeting big carp, I'll fish a flatbed method with ground bait and bunches of maggots.
Sound.
Or a 7mm washter.
Sound.
But the problem with ground bait and washters is it causes too much of a little pocket for the washter to sit in, and therefore sometimes the hook bait doesn't roll out from the ground bait for quite a while because you've embedded a little coffin area for the barrel to sit in, and the fish can't get to your hook bait, whereas maggots will roll out.
Thanks.
So again, your ground bait is all down to the depth of your mix and what you mix and how you mix it, and that's why you always keep them separate and just experiment as the day goes on, depending on the depth of the water that you're fishing in.
Lovely. And the third and final question: what determines? I've already asked it. Me being inquisitive, it was a hook bait question. Yeah. So
right. Okay.
That's
no worries, mate.
Yeah.
No worries. Well, I hope that's obviously. Look, we can always go into a lot more detail, but I think that's the basics of it. That I think sometimes even something as simple as a feeder is the difference between catching a load of fish and coming off the bank thinking, right, I've got an idea of what I'm doing, or coming off the bank, missing bites, getting liners, not getting bites, and thinking, well, I'm going to obviously didn't want to feed today, because I was getting signs they were there, but obviously they just weren't bothered. and there's certain individuals that I've helped along that, you know, are world champions in this area.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, they can't believe the difference between the style of the feeder that you use and how important it is, depending on the conditions that you face with and the environment and depth and everything.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. The biggest one that I took away is the depth.
Yeah.
The depth seems everything from listening to you. Depth seems really important. Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that's helped you out, and obviously everyone that's asked questions. I hope that's informative for you.
Yeah.
If you need anything else regarding that, whoever's asked the questions, by all means, just get in touch with me if you need to.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Nick, for answering the questions. Really appreciate it.
Not a problem, mate. Not
Brilliant.
a problem.
Have you got a message for everyone at home during this time?
Yeah, get a calendar like that.
Oi, oi. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Cheers, Nick.
Stay safe for everybody. Stay safe. Keep busy, and I'm sure we'll all be out on the bank meeting each other where we should be very soon.
Sound. Cheers, Nick. Thank you very much.
All right, mate.
And we'll see you
See you later.
Take care. See you in a bit.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.